Hello and welcome everyone to our panel, Ukraine's Victory Before Peace. I want to thank Lato for sponsoring this debate, and we're going to have hopefully a lively discussion amongst us on stage, plus we have a participant dialing in from Ukraine as well. I'm Kim Dozier. I am a contributor to Time magazine, and I did get to visit Ukraine briefly in the spring, and at that point, people were very worried about Russia's progress. And there was a lot of talk about potentially or possibly being forced into negotiating with Moscow. Now, after the surge and what looks like Moscow on the back foot, that seems to be receding. Some wars end in negotiation, some in surrender. From what I learned on the ground, I can't see anyone in Ukraine ever surrendering. Even if the traditional conventional army is broken, then the people would keep fighting in an unconventional war. And everything we hear out of Moscow indicates that Putin would raise Ukraine to seize it. And he will break his own country if necessary to do that. We're hearing news reports and seeing home video of men being literally seized off the streets of Moscow, from shopping malls, to fight in Ukraine. It seems that President Vladimir Putin has decided that at least being perceived by his own people to win the war in Ukraine is existential for him. So how you get from where we are now to negotiations is a complicated and it's almost impossible to conceive. So we'll discuss that in a moment, but first we have a video address from Ukraine from Mrs. Olha Stefanishyna. She's Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration. So if you can watch the screens.
More than 230 days have passed since Russia has started a full-scale war on the territory of my country, Ukraine. Massive missile attacks by the Russian Federation have been ongoing since October 10th throughout all of the area of Ukraine. The aggressor state and the terrorist state has purposefully systemically shooting at energy infrastructure facilities as well as the civilian and cultural objects all over Ukraine. Losing on the battlefield, Russia continues to do what it does: insidiously terrorize and kill civilians. Do the paper annexations. 19 people have been killed and 105 injured as a result of Russian missile strikes on Ukraine only on 10th of October. This Monday, as a result of the occupiers' attack on the residential building in Kiev, 4 people have already died. Among them is a young family that is expecting a child, was expecting a child. Since October 10th, 30% of Ukrainian power stations have been destroyed, causing massive blackouts across the country. The goal is very simple: to sow panic, demoralize population, frightened to leave Ukrainians without light and heat, basically to freeze us to death. New Holodomor, isn't it? We all understand that upcoming winter will be extremely difficult for Ukraine, for all of the Europe, and especially for the people of Ukraine. We will win the battle with the terrorist state. We need to stay strong. We need to stay united. For Ukrainians, it is the issue of survival, and we will survive anything to overcome the evil. For Europe, it's preserving democracy, basic values, unity, and principles we all stand for, to overcome with the strengths. By carrying out energy terror against Ukraine, Russia also increases the energy pressure on the European Union. Starts with the blackmail and nuclear threats. As a result of the large-scale strikes, Ukraine was forced to stop exporting electricity to EU from October 11th. Whereas Ukrainian electricity, which we exported to EU after synchronization and via separate lines to Moldova and Poland, helped Europe to replace Russian gas, to build more sustainable strategies, to maintain the stability of European energy system. So now we are here to discuss what must be done. First, we need to deepen our cooperation and solidarity in the energy field. We need to act decisively to be on top of the agenda, but not to be part of the Russian agenda. We must act decisively to restore the destructions caused by Russian missiles attacks. 4 months, Ukraine advocated for a modern air defense system and missile defense system. So secondly, closing Ukrainian sky. Now we feel that finally our pleas has been heard. Urgent measures and decisions need to be taken now. Third, Russian Federation can no longer be part of international organizations established to promote peace, to promote and ensure security, cooperation between states. And this should be also met with the unity of all democratic world. Fourth, new sanctions must be aimed to the most important sectors of the Russian economy, in particular nuclear energy. Fifth, Russia is a terrorist state. It is a fact, and it should be officially recognized as such. In their recent address to NATO, Ukrainian leaders, President, Prime Minister and a Speaker of Ukrainian Parliament stressed that active measures to deter Russia should be taken, and recognition of the obvious is now in time, which is needed. Democratic world should retake geopolitical initiative. Taking this opportunity, I would like to thank Latvia and our Baltic friends for standing with Ukraine from day one, from minute one. And especially, I would like to express our strong appreciation for your strong position to support Ukraine's NATO membership, to support the security guarantees, and to be the leader of the geopolitical agenda. This war, which is now lasting for more than 230 days, is the first chapter of the new world history. And now it's us who will make the decision, who will be the authors of the next chapters, and hope this will be those democratic countries and those democratic alliances who have managed to build democracy, peace, and respect to the principles and the rights of the people, who managed over the last 80 years after the end of the Second World to build the world which is now better, prosperous, and the world built on respect, unity, and cohesion. So let's make sure that the discussions you're having today will pave the way towards the new chapter of the modern history, which will allow all of us to live in a peaceful and secure Europe, resilient and strong against the threats of individual totalitarian regimes of other countries. Wishing you fruitful discussion and a successful event. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you to the Deputy Prime Minister for providing that address. Now, I'm going to put questions to our panel and introduce everyone as I call on them. I want to start with a lightning round based on some of what we just heard, beginning with President Zelensky's advisor, Aleksey Arestovich, joining us from Ukraine. Now, the Deputy Prime Minister just talked about wanting to see a peaceful Europe at some point. Peace will require negotiation at some point. But 3 days ago, President Zelensky tweeted, since October 10th, 30% of Ukraine's power stations have been destroyed, causing massive blackouts across the country. No space left for negotiations with Putin's regime. Mr. Arestovich, where does that leave the negotiation of peace?
Problem is, it's one more argument from President against the negotiations with Mr. Putin. Because a few weeks before, he says no negotiations exactly with Mr. Putin, like a president, like a leader of Russian Federations, and even stressed this decision by the decision of the Council of National Security of Ukraine. After the massive cruise and drones attack of our heating energy on the 10th of October, President just stress one more time that he couldn't provide any discussion or any negotiations with the person who providing like such war crimes against the civilian infrastructure here in Ukraine. There's one more argument for will not have discussion with Mr. Putin.
But is that calling for Putin's ouster before any sort of talks can happen?
No, I don't think so, really.
Okay. I want to go to Claudia at the far end. What do you think?
I think the title of this panel is actually quite telling. I think it needs victory to come to real peace first. You will always have negotiations, but the negotiations come or they are built on the military reality on the ground. So I think we need to make a big difference. So kind of the military reality first and then come negotiations. And we also need to make a difference between negotiations and talks. Negotiations is about the future relationship of the status of Ukraine, about the territory, about reparations and all those kind of things. And this can only come after, as this panel title says, victory. But until then, you need on a totally different level talks in order to have some kind of risk reduction. But I think we need to make very clear the difference between talking like the Americans do with the Russians about risk reduction and negotiation that can only come after, as this panel says, a victory.
And I should have said, Claudia Major is the head of the International Security Division at the German Institute for International Security. And next to her, Hanna Shelest. You are, among other things, editor-in-chief at Ukraine-Analytica. What do you think?
You know, first of all, negotiations is just the instrument. Let's not overestimate or underestimate. It is not the final goal or something more. It is just the instrument. And for me, it's really strange how we frame it. Negotiations about status of Ukraine. Why not negotiations about status of Russia? Peace is not about Ukraine surrendering something. And peace is the certain conditions in which Ukraine as a state will be able to functioning, first of all. The question is with what we are coming to negotiations. Ukraine had negotiations in February, in March. Let's remember Belarus. Let's remember March in Istanbul. Anything changed from the Russian perspective since then? Absolutely not. The conditions they are setting are completely the same. Their statements becoming even more Nazi type, because you hear more and more from the top politicians about the elimination of Ukrainian nation, re-education of Ukrainian kids. Sorry, that is not about peace. It is about the elimination of the nation, most of all. So here it seems to me that we should not make the negotiations as the holy cow of this. We need to understand what is the ultimate goal, where we would like to be, what is the future. We would like to be in the future where the Russian Federation is allowed, or somebody like the Russian Federation is allowed such type of the behavior. Okay, let's see to talk about what. What is on the table, on the agenda of negotiations? That is the biggest issue. I absolutely agree with you with one thing, that is the question with what positions we are coming there. If we are coming when Ukraine was just a few days as attacked, and we didn't know what to predict, how our partners will react. We had German ministers saying, why to support you, you would have just 3 days and then everything will finish. With these, definitely it was one situation, what to negotiate, and some risk minimizing or something. When Ukraine demonstrated that we are capable for liberating our territories, where we are demonstrating the huge resistance of the civilians at the occupied territories, that is absolutely different type of the negotiations. The talks, they are happening about the exchange of the prisoners of war, for example, or the grain talks. They are happening, but that is the individual cases, let's say, that are always present. In such case, you can say that you negotiate.
So tactical, not strategic.
Absolutely, it's not even tactical. It's like, do you negotiate with terrorists? Theoretically, no. But then you understand that when somebody just kidnapped, let's say, the building of the bank, you still have these talks about, for example, releasing few people. Is it negotiations? No. It is just what you need to do to minimize some risk around. So that's why let's just be a little bit more, I don't know, careful or open about the words that we're using. Negotiation is just instrument.
So let's go to Thomas Kleine-Brockhoff, who is with the Berlin office of the German Marshall Fund. What do you think? Can talks happen with Putin in office?
Well,
I mean, strategic talks.
first of all, it's not only about Putin. I mean, as far as I can see, the Ukrainians have put 4 conditions on the table: territorial integrity, reparations, war crimes tribunals, and no Putin. I would actually, if I was to add a 5th, which is the return of the abducted individuals, especially children. But of course, that is the position before conversations, talks, eventually negotiations have happened. Wars tend to end with negotiations unless they end with complete surrender. So the conditions under which that happens are unknowable. I think I'm with Claudia that we have to do 2 things. One is pave the way and enable conversations for risk reduction. And then there is a second element that I would like to add. We have to, and we can at this point, have to have a conception of what a post-war Ukraine might look like in order to start conceptualizing a world in which Ukraine could be living in after this war, in order to make it more possible, to imagine more of those things that we can't imagine right now because it's so hard to get to that moment that you're talking about.
So before we get into a discussion of the post-war Ukraine and rebuilding, let's talk about what Ukraine is facing right now. Mr. Arestovich, you're right there in the middle of it. I see in it with a background that reveals nothing about where you are, which is a good thing for your own security. But we've been hearing and seeing in the news daily airstrikes hitting Kyiv and many other major cities. What are you and Ukrainians on the ground facing right now? What is a daily experience like?
I will say about what we all face right now, because the formula that Mr. Putin using right now looks like, for me, like just using the European and West economical crisis in this winter, freezing to the death Ukraine and making a great blackout for Ukraine, using a lot of Iranian drones, a lot of Iranian rockets, probably missile rockets, ballistic rockets, which is one he negotiated with Iran to buy, and use the mobilized personnel for stopped our offensive, or even providing counter-offensive from the some direction on the front line. And Putin do not think, as for me, he don't think about winning this war. He's thinking about how do not lose this war, because it's mean political death for him, just in the Russia, because in Russia, people do not legitimize leaders who usually lost the war. And I think we face them together about this. And the main problem for us, it's the same problem. We just have three problems at all: weapon, and weapon. If we had enough weapon, we decide the problem of the Russian Federation, the problem of the Mr. Putin here on the battlefield, just by ourselves. We could and we were capable to decide this problem. We need just weapon, and it will be enough for Mr. Putin. Main problem, as for me, is I think it's the problem we do not have cognitive model of future of the world after the Ukrainian victory. Nobody can say how it could be, what could be with Russia, what is the next Russian Federation without Mr. Putin, and what is the level of the relationship between new Ukraine and new Russia. This is the main problem. So as for me, we have to build or design the cognitive model of future Russian and Ukrainian relationship after our winning. And
but before
I even say more, just problem of the East Europe at all. what is problem of security, economy, and political life in Europe after Mr. Putin will be defeated by Ukrainians.
But before you get to defining the relationship between a new Ukraine and a new Russia, you've got to get through this upcoming winter. I mean, I understand, and I've heard you all ask for weapons over and over, but can you repair the electricity grid fast enough to keep people in their homes this winter? Because when I looked at the forecast, it looks like it's going to be like last winter. Not much precipitation, temps mostly around freezing, which means you're going to have families in freezing homes, especially in urban centers. They can't light a fire in the fireplace in an apartment building. How are you going to keep another exodus of people leaving Ukraine just to find warmth?
It would be a great problem for us, but we still, most of us still people who managed to survive in 19th, which is the situation in the winters looks like today, without any heating, without any electricity for hours and something like this. It's the first step. Second topic, it's we are the country which has 16 nuclear units here. It's Mr. Putin can't manage to take out all our electricity at all. We could have great problems with electricity and heating, but I don't think really we completely lost electricity for all the winter. It could be 12 hours without electricity per day, 6 hours, 4, but I don't think really it could be total blackout for us.
Got it. So you can find a way, you're saying, to parcel the electricity out to keep people somewhat warm. Thomas, you wanted to jump in.
Mr. Putin has been inventive in throwing new things at the Ukrainians, and the idea that he could destroy or harm 30% of Ukraine's electricity infrastructure within 10 days, while before Ukraine was an energy exporting country, even during war, lets you understand how you traject this forward in the coming weeks and months. So therefore, I think there needs to be a quick reaction to this. What Western countries, in my view, need to do now is identify what I would call survival projects for Ukraine, and the energy grid is such a thing. And one has to get over the idea that we will only repair what can never be destroyed again. So I think what we need to do is you're going to need a quick, rapid reaction force to the energy grid in order not to allow this to go forward at the speed and help repair what can be repaired now.
Claudia.
I think that's a really valid point, but that points to a bigger kind of question, is that we are in the situation where we see Ukraine militarily winning, but losing economically in an enormous amount. I mean, we have seen, according to estimations, that the GDP is falling up to 35 or 40%. And according to earlier IMF estimations, Ukraine needs $5 billion a month to keep the state going from paying salaries, which is a lot. And so far, the money is not coming in enough. So the Western countries they don't fill the hole. So I think if you think about the next winter, it's about supporting Ukraine with the things Thomas mentioned in a very practical sense. In the military sense, this is what the advisor just told us, so weapons, weapons, weapons. But it also applies to us in Western Europe. All the 3 points, it applies to us that we are able to continue, or that we continue to deliver military equipment, but that we also keep the political support for Ukraine going. So I think the winter is a challenge much bigger to Ukraine, obviously, but it's for us, Western society, the challenge also to maintain the political support, which is a precondition for the support packages Thomas mentioned, for the continued military support and the continued financial support. So it's really going to be a testing moment, which you have to take very seriously. But this challenge of winning militarily, but losing economically is something we have to keep in mind.
Hanna, you were nodding when Aleksey was talking about Ukrainians have toughed through tough winters before. Like, how do they do it? And what would you like to see coming in from Europe?
You know, that is really interesting how we perceive differently the situation about what is this war and what does mean winning and losing. You're speaking about the military winning. We are thinking about this not from the military perspective. For us, it is the existential war. We are ready for the certain concessions in terms of our daily life. Will I have my latte or will I have my cappuccino? I don't care. Or the price is a little bit higher, because I understand, will my state exist? Will my nation exist or not? Because for us, it is some kind of the war for the independence that we didn't have in 1991, but which we had for the last 300 years de facto. And now it is when we decide this moment. So when I talk with my German friends, they are thinking about that will be a little bit higher price. When I speak with my Ukrainian friends, they are thinking, okay, I already bought 3 additional socks, and probably I will make a little bit warmer for my windows. So you see, it is the different mentality of thinking. We are thinking from the point of view of resilience, about which Olga was talking about. We are talking about how to prepare. We are talking at the local level. I'm in Odessa, yep, so I'm living there. We have better weather, definitely, than Kiev, so we are maybe a little bit relaxed, but we have extreme rains and fogs. Trust me, our zero is like -10 in Kiev. But we are talking about saving electricity, so probably not all street lights should be, so to help. Or we are buying the candles and something for the, how do you call it, like the small gas balance, what you use for the camping, in case something happening. So people are just methodically preparing. That situation can be problematic, but not panicking, because we understand why we are doing it, that it's not because the government is bad or something. We understand that that is the situation when the whole country should be united in these difficulties. That's why how we lived, yeah, I'm absolutely agree with Aleksey. I also remember when in 1998 I was sitting at the university in the gloves, because it was that cold at the lectures, but the education process was not stopping. And was it normal? Definitely not. But at the same time, that is the reality, and we survived, and everything is okay. We developed, we studied, nobody failed. That's the question is of your perceptions and of your readiness, and that is exactly about the resistance. Support from our partners. That is important, what we already started to have, when several countries who understand that, for example, they cannot provide the military support, maybe they just don't have it, but they already have the electrical cables or some generators or some equipment that can help to repair the damaged stations. Japan is sending cleaning stations for the fresh water, because who knows that Mykolaiv is already several months without any type of the fresh water, because Russians destroyed the station there. So what? The city exists, something is happening there, we are bringing water there and machines.
So that question of support and what to provide, I want to go back to Aleksey. And are you getting what you need because in a wartime economy, people are having trouble getting jobs, and also because of what Russia is attacking, people are having trouble getting some of the basics for daily life?
Anna says very, very, very important things. For us, it's existential war. It's a great possibility for us to close the question, which is the 400 years still. And the main problem of the Russian half of the 1,000 years intentions to close Ukrainian questions, to make the Ukrainian nation do not exist, without language, without traditions, without our national idea, without anything, without us. They want to transform us to Russians, and we don't want this. And we're ready to pay any prices to win the Russia, any prices. No, there is no condition in the world, nuclear weapon, cold winter, economical crisis, who can stop us in our intentions to win the Russia. But other guest says completely rational things. We really need weapon. We really need economical support. We really need financial support, because the amount what we really need per month is $9 billion, not 5.
Wow, and you're not even getting...
Situation is more worse than we really have, and than we really think. And
Sorry, Aleksey, to interrupt you, but how much of that 9 billion are you getting from the outside?
Maybe, I don't know, but it's no months for we have completely amount they really need. No month from these 8 months. There is no months for $9 billion helping.
Got it.
That's so we still manage to ourselves with the comparably support of other countries. And for me, for my opinion, is a big and not big. It's huge claim for Western societies, because what you have to do when Mr. Putin completely get for the terroristic methods against Ukrainian people, because the massive shooting of the heating energy and the electricity energy, it looks like a sign of genocide and war crime. And
so you're
what the
saying,
Western society could answer him for this.
So you're saying it's a moral imperative for the West to make up for not just providing you the weapons to survive the attacks, but to rebuild the damage that Russia has caused.
It's cost, but we still has resources for rebuilding, for repairing our heating energy and electricity energy. It's not so easy, but we can. And we need this type of support for more materials and more devices for rebuild and repair. And I think we will win this winter. We win the challenge against us. We need both economic support with air defense support, first of all.
With air defense.
Because he found a key against our air defense system, which means a lot of cheaper but dangerous Iranian drones. Russia Federation buy from Iran about 2,000 and 400 Iranian drones, and they use it.
I understand you guys have managed to intercept roughly 50% of them, but you need to know which airframe, which technology they're using in order to properly combat them.
Yeah, because my main idea for Mr. Putin to force us spend all our military expensive air defense missiles for the cheapest drones. And after we lost all our air defense missiles, they start against using the cruise missiles and Russian aviation, which is now do not used against Ukraine because they're afraid about our air defense. And this is a big challenge for us, and we need really help for this. So.
And of course, here in the Baltics and across Europe, they're looking at the use of drones against you and thinking about the fact that they could be one day used against Baltic countries, against NATO members.
So it's our common challenge for Mr. Putin. It's just for Respublika, for you, for us, for you, and we have to give our common answer for this.
So I want to pick up on one thing that you said about reconstruction and reconstructing the grid. Thomas, you've done some in-depth work. German Marshall Fund put out a report on what reconstruction would look like. When can, though, you seriously start thinking about reconstruction?
Well, Aleksey has already mentioned some of the financial needs. When you add these financial needs up, there's the military that we all are familiar with. There is the about 5 billion per month in the budget gap that Ukraine has to close, projected to be about 3 to 4 billion a month next year, provided the war is ongoing. There is relief efforts that is being invested in. On top of that, we're talking about a bill of several hundred billion, the number is unknowable as the war goes on, of reconstruction investments. Now, these reconstruction investments are not all going to be state, they are not all going to be, they are going to be private, they are not all going to be Western countries, but Ukraine is going to invest in that itself, but these numbers are going to be large. Now, the problem is you even have to get there. Mr. Putin is now after having tried to starve the country, is now trying to freeze the country, abduct its children. You're seeing the character of a war of an extinction here. That is what we're seeing. So you even have to get to the place when you can seriously think about reconstructing. It is much harder to reconstruct a country that is broke and that is destroyed. So therefore, a lot of the investment that Western countries need to make needs to be front-loaded. When you think about it, simply take out the moral dimension, take out the military dimension, take out the political dimension, and just look at it from a financial standpoint of these investments. Probably the best investment in Ukrainian reconstruction is arms right now, because on the front end, that will prevent costs on the back end. If we can't do these numbers will mount. The second stage is macrofinancial. Macrofinancial, the United States has given the bulk of the macrofinancial aid so far and has given it as grants. The European Union has pledged and been slow and only giving it has not been giving it as grants but as loans. So there is an obligo on the EU side. As I understand it, the needs of Ukraine for this budget year are completed, but we're also talking about the next one. So the billions are adding up, and that is what Mr. Putin is hoping for. That is his strategy, as was said here on the panel. It's not about winning this war on the battlefield, but destroying Ukraine as a nation and breaking the will of Western countries by running up the bill. That is, I think, what we're seeing. And what we need to put against this, and we've tried to do what I can say is the first blueprint of what a joint and comprehensive a Western response could be in this document. They've got to do this plot, because if you see me around, I have more copies of this. Please come see me if you're interested. What we've tried to do is to look at this comprehensively in terms of financial needs, of leadership, of governance, of accountability, and the question, very much disputed, when to start.
Kim, if possible, small addition to this. There are two moments that we also need to understand. First, sometimes it's not the question of quantity of money, amount of money that we receive, but to receive them timely. Because the question is, when a lot of billions are pledged but not delivered, you understand how difficult that is for economy, because you cannot plan, you don't understand when you receive, and then suddenly you receive a big amount that you need quickly to understand how to spend. So sometimes with the money, it's not the number of billions, but when you receive it. The second question is that we need to create conditions for Ukrainian economy to work. It's not that Ukraine is just waiting for the money, like what's happened with the grain deal. We know that the grain export is the significant income for Ukraine, for Ukrainian state budget, and for the agriculture. So as soon as we manage to sign it, it's still very problematic, and we now see the problems of this. But Ukrainian business started to work. It means we started to pay taxes. It means that we started to have some economic activity. It means that we need less support for these people and external support.
Exactly right.
At the same time, now we are at the risk, because in the mid of November, this agreement should be over. The Russians already expressed their concerns that probably they will not continue it. But even without this, Russians are now sabotaging its implementation, because if you look to the marine traffic, how many ships are now waiting for the, how it's called, inspection by the joint team, it's up to 100 ships waiting. Some of them are waiting up to 2 weeks. How many ships will go? Who will do this business? What are the losses of the private companies because of this? But it is only grain, and there are plenty of other spheres where it's easier to help Ukrainian business rather than just to give money that will be added to the budget.
Well, with that, we've got about 15 minutes left, and I do want to call on people from the audience. So I see one that I'll be calling on and another, but I'm just going to pivot to, while people get their questions in order, a question we've gotten in virtually that I want to throw to Claudia and ask from the perspective of the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. There are rumors that Iranians are helping Russians on the ground. Do you expect this could actually help them, and are Western sanctions enough? And a coda to this, Ned Price in the State Department press briefing yesterday did say he said publicly, it's the US assessment that Iranian trainers have been on the ground in Crimea training Russians how to operate these drone systems and helping them launch them. So Claudia, this nexus, Russia-Iran, what does it mean?
Maybe a first quick note that we have no institute's opinion. So I'm not a German government official, neither I'm presenting the opinion of my institute, it's just mine. So I think it's an important point to do. I mean, as you just said, there are confirmations that Iranians are helping the Russian, and it does make a very extremely brutal difference in Ukraine. The question is, I think, what countries are still able and willing to help Russia? And so far, it's in a more subtle way China, and it's a more open way Iran. What are our instruments to stop that? I think they are, particularly in that case of the training on the drones, very limited. So I think it's more the investment and how can we support Ukraine in protecting than really stopping those kind of things. But I really would like to come back to the point, I think that Thomas and you made earlier. I think we're talking on different levels here, and we should make the difference clear. I think Thomas was more talking about the longer strategic perspective, and you were talking about the current moment, and we should clearly make the difference. And if we talk about the longer moment, we really have to pay attention to assure the political support in the Western countries. I totally understand your argument that it's no problem to freeze, but you have to understand that the debates we are having, the further we move away from this region and the further we move to countries like Germany or beyond, we have a different debate. So getting the long-term political support is utterly important. Russia's things, you put it nicely, it can outsuffer Western states in the winter with high energy prices, with inflation, with propaganda, with fake news and all those things. If we don't fight that, if we don't get the political support in those states, the economic, the financial, the military support will suffer. So we should not underestimate the necessity to explain ever and ever again and call for this long-term political support. And as nasty as it sounds,
it's going to become an influence fight for the soul of the
exactly,
public.
but in some publics, there is a war fatigue already. I don't say it's great, I'm just describing reality in many countries. And if you don't take that seriously and explain ever again why it's necessary to keep that support going, it will be reduced. So I think we should not criticize that, but recognize it as a problem and make a clear case.
I want to call on this gentleman in the front row, if one of our microphone runners could get him a microphone. And if you could also, as people stand up and ask their questions, introduce yourself. If you could, the gentleman standing, could you hand him a microphone, please? If you could introduce yourself briefly so we know where you're coming from.
Yes, my name is Klaus Wittmann. I'm a former Bundeswehr general, and I teach contemporary history at Potsdam University. And in this semester, recent history of Ukraine, where, among other things, I try to countervail the habit to look at Ukraine only through Russian eyes. Now, my question is to Mr. Arestovich, who said weapons, weapons, weapons. There are some, also German officials, who seem to take comfort that now anti-air systems are the priority, and this would spare us the necessity to deliver armored personnel carriers and combat tanks. Would you agree to what I keep telling the German government? Yes, of course, Ukraine urgently needs defense against rockets and drones, but it continues to need artillery and multiple rocket launchers, and for advance and protection in the regaining of their territory. Of course, armored combat vehicles are still dearly needed. I would ask you to reinforce this case, perhaps by explaining and illustrating for us this from your perspective. And one remark to what Claudia Major just said. I think it is an eminent leadership task to explain to our Western populations that if Putin wins, the hardship for us will be much greater than what we suffer at the moment.
Thank you for that. So, Aleksey, this is your chance to give us your wish list for weapons, weapons, weapons.
Thank you so much. If Mr. Putin wins, it will be absolutely catastrophic for the whole world, because little Putins around the world understand they could to use terrorize their neighbors or in other nations, and they could win. It's mean the terrorists win even not on just on the ground, they win in moral sphere, and it was absolutely catastrophic for our values. And it means the terroristic methods will be overvalued in our mind, collective mind, and it's something terrible for whole Western civilizations, for all of us. What about weapon? Just some amounts. Russia still has 1,1700 1.52 millimeters cannons or howitzers on our front line. We only has 300.5. Some of them are need to repair, or some was destroyed in battle. And we has just interior front line from Kharkiv to Kherson. It's 1,300 kilometers, 1,300 kilometers, which is mean like a distance between Paris and Prague, or maybe even Warsaw. So it's a huge front line, and we have same situation for next 2,500 kilometers, and which, if we're speaking about Belarus border on the north of Ukraine, and border with Transnistria, and sea borders in the Black Sea and Azov Sea. And this is our conflict. It's Russia-Ukrainian conflict modern. It's the biggest conflict still World War II in Europe. It's conflict need. If we want to manage this conflict, we need a lot of weapons. So we need twice or even thirds, even fourth weapons they really West gave us. And the problem is about, we spent a lot of our soldiers and our civilians for retaking our territory. Now we have some problems near the Bakhmut, some problems near the Kherson regions. That's about we do not have enough artillery and enough armored vehicle carrier and tanks, because the base of the offensive is first of all armored vehicles and long-range artillery and long-range missiles. So we was provided by them, but it's still not enough. We need twice or even thirds for liberate our territory before Mr. Putin managed to freeze us.
Did you say you need? Did you say you need twice as many as you've got? Did I understand that?
And twice than we already got. Yes.
So when last spring, one of the big headlines, President Zelensky had come out and said that casualty figures were sometimes above 100 a day in death and injury. Has that rate stabilized? Are you training enough people to make up for your battlefield losses?
Problem is every brigade has a combat units, which is professional militaries. Mm-hmm. And after 8 months of the war, they was just killed or injured. And now we used to, mostly we're fighting by the mobilized people, which is have to be trained and have to has modern weapon who could still against and face Russian amounts of weaponry and amounts of people. And this is a problem which is grows. We already win. We of course we win this war, but we're speaking about prices for our economy, prices for our civilians, prices for our militaries, because we spend hundreds lives per day. We killed Russians 6 or 7 times more, but it's still a great prices for us.
But you're still losing up to 100 people off the battlefield per day.
Yes, now it could be even more because it's very heavy fighting near the Bakhmut and near the Soledar.
Because, of course, winning back territory is traditionally always harder than defending. I want to call on the gentleman standing up. Please wait for the microphone.
My name's Bobo Low. I'm interested in the China angle. What are Ukraine's hopes and expectations of China's role, not just in the war, but in relation to its partnership with Russia and eventually possibly a post-war economic reconstruction?
And before we get to that, can we just take one more question from this gentleman, because we only have about 6 minutes left.
Hello, my name is Anton Lysenkov, Spectre Press online magazine. My question is to Mr. Arestovich. You mentioned that had Ukraine had enough weaponry, you would decide the problem of Putin on your own. Does it mean that you plan to bring the war to the Russian territory and go up to Moscow, capture the capital, and then...
Okay, two
And then
excellent
defeat them.
All right, Aleksey, we're going to let you think about that answer for a minute and deal with the China angle first.
Yeah, I will be glad to answer about China.
Okay.
For us, neutrality of China was probably the most preferable variant, because from the very beginning we understood perfectly that China will not ally with us due to their difficult relations with the United States. So it's not about us, it is about the Chinese-US relations that been at that time for several years. At the same time, if you look for the Chinese involvement in Ukraine, they were our biggest trade partner, $15 billion trade per year, and increasing almost twice from 19 till 20. But at the same time, almost no investments of China in Ukraine. Very limited, and just bad cases like Motor Siege conflict that you probably aware. So they really tried to get what is beneficial for their strategic industries, airspace industry, intelligence, rather than for real investment and development. So as for now, what Ukraine would appreciate, China not helping Russia, not helping avoiding sanctions, and not supplying with weapons, and voting at least abstain in the United Nations. Definitely would like to see more, but we are realistic. So in this case, for example, I'm much more worried about Indian position rather than Chinese. Because India really helped buying Russian energy sources, and many other statements, when India, as for me, was more pro-Russian neutral than China at many of the situations within these months. And India pretend that they're a democratic state and they're in our camp, yep, and China not pretending, they just have their own interest. In the future, I can assume that China will come with some reconstruction ideas. That definitely can be some business investments, more in the road constructions or agriculture, those spheres when they always were interested in. The question is, and it is still unanswered, and it will not be answered that quickly, will we be welcoming them? Because with the position, this strange position that they have now, partially they are losing the opportunities that they may have after the victory that they could have in terms of economic cooperation.
But of course, I couldn't see Ukraine saying no if China, after the war, wanted to write a big check.
No, you know, it's becoming already a strategic question, as some of the European countries are asking, like what Lithuania did with the 16+1 initiative. So it is, we are not in the situation as 10 years ago, when China One Belt, One Road was seen as something positive for the development. We already have experience and lessons learned with what this money are coming. So even when China is bringing money, we are already reading contracts very attentively. What is there? Not to get to the situation that Sri Lanka or Piraeus port or in Serbia some cases they had, we already have this knowledge. So it's not that it is free money. Everybody already knows that Chinese money also come with the conditions.
Before I go to Ukraine for the Russia question, I wanted to ask Claudia and Thomas, what would happen to European support if Ukraine went onto Russian territory? What would happen to European support if Ukraine started fighting over the border into Russian territory?
Look,
No.
I mean, this question is so far out of left outfield that
I get asked it a lot on CNN, so I figure I can ask it of you here.
But all you can hear from me is my answer, and my answer is that it is so hard for me to imagine this that I'm hard pressed to give you an answer. Of course, it would change the situation dramatically the further you go west, and certainly in the United States. But it is so remote as a concept that I don't think we should spend too much time on it.
Honestly, I mean, if you just look at the facts, almost 20% of Ukrainian territory is still occupied. So we are so far away from any of those scenarios. And I would even say, talking about it as if it were a realistic one is really not helpful in certain national debates, if I might put it this way. So I think we should really concentrate upon the situation we are now in, and do what we should do in military and political and financial terms, but developing a scenario which is really far away and not a helpful one is...
No,
granted,
I will ask just a simple question. Why do we need to be there?
But looking
and there's
ahead,
no indication. I mean, if you look at all what we talk about, there's no indication that that's a realistic scenario.
it's actually just a simple military calculation. Once you're trying to seize back territory that happens to be close to the border, or if you want to hit supply lines, the supply lines are inside Russia.
But we already did it.
Aleksey, the question was to you, though. Is the current Kyiv government, is your intention to go any further than your borders?
No, we will not fight. We will not fight on Russia territory because we are not aggressor state, and we just, our main goal is liberate Ukrainian territory, and that's all. We completely understand, and President says we will not speak with Mr. Putin, but we still ready for negotiations after Mr. Putin. We completely understand Russia will never get out from our borders, and we, after even this terrified war, we have to rebuild our relationship with Russian Federation. So it means we have to defeat Mr. Putin here on our territory, liberate him completely for the borders on the state on the August of the 1991. And after that, with next on new Russian president, Russian government, start to rebuild new relationship.
And with that, I want to thank all the panelists here, and let's hope that next year at this forum, we are discussing the recovery, not the battle to survive. Thank you very much.